The first problem was how to pass the cable across, how to pass the first line, which will ultimately become a rope strong enough to pull the heavy steel cable. So how to get that fishing line across? It's like 200 feet from center of roof to center of roof, roughly. We had all kind of ideas, and the idea that prevailed was the one I thought was ridiculous. It was a bow and arrow, but it actually worked. So with a fishing line and a bow and arrow, we passed the first line across, and then all night we pulled, and then the cable was secured.
It took all night to complete the complex job of rigging, to anchor and secure as best he could the slender 1-inch cable a quarter of a mile in the sky, across the 130-foot gap separating the two immense towers. 1,360 feet below, Wall Street was just beginning to come to life, when, at a little past 7, on the morning of August 7, 1974, Philippe Petit stepped out onto the slender thrumming wire that stretched across the immense shimmering void.
Whenever other worlds invite us, whenever we are balancing on the boundaries of our limited human condition, that's where life starts. That's where you start feeling yourself living. So when I found myself 1 foot on the wire, 1 foot on the building, and ready to decide to shift my way to become a bird, it was not something new. And after a few steps, I knew I was in my element. I didn't even take the full length of the crossing to get to know the rigging and the vibration of the building and the wire. And then very slowly as I walked, I was overwhelmed by a sense of easiness, a sense of simplicity. And actually I can be seen on the first pictures smiling probably out of disbelief. It's so easy after all those years and months of ups and downs and detours, victories and disasters. Finally, I was carrying my life on a path that was the simplest, the most beautiful, and the easiest.
Down on the street below, thousands of people on their way into work looked up in wonder and disbelief, transfixed by the sight of the tiny figure walking on air between the two towers.
Somehow I found myself spending 45 minutes and doing 8 crossings. There were thousands of people, at some point 100,000 people. And actually, at some point, during these different crossings, I actually could hear my audience a quarter of a mile below. And I could hear them punctuating what I was doing on the wire. Let's say if I would take a bow on one leg or salute the horizon or kneel in front of the tower to say hello to the tower, I would hear almost with an echo, the people cheering, screaming, applauding.
I had in my car a radio that connected me to the police desk at the World Trade Center. And on the day in question, the light went on. And the patrolman at the police desk said, "Mr. T, there's a problem in the World Trade Center." I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "There's a guy walking on a tightrope between the two towers. What should we do?" And I couldn't think of anything else. I said, "Don't let him fall off." And I hung up. So then I drove a little further. I called back. I said, "By the way, this is incredible. There's somebody walk. If he doesn't fall off and he comes on, don't arrest him."
Within minutes, police officers were dispatched to the roof of the South Tower. Sergeant Charles Daniels of the Port Authority Police never forgot the things he saw that day.
Well, after arriving on the rooftop, Officer Myers and I observed the tightrope dancer, because you couldn't call him a walker, approximately halfway between the two towers. And upon seeing us, he started to smile and laugh, and he started going into a dancing routine on the high wire. He then went down to one knee, and we stepped to the background. I said for everyone to be quiet. And at this time, he laid down on the high wire and, just lackadaisically rolled around on the wire like. He got up, he started walking and laughing and dancing, and he turned around and ran back out into the middle. He was bouncing up and down. His feet were actually leaving the wire, and then he would resettle back on the wire again. Unbelievably, really, to the point that everybody was spellbound in the watching of it. And I personally figured I was watching something that somebody else would never see again in the world. Thought it was once in a lifetime.
During the walks, I had a sense of dancing on top of the world. I had a sense of having a communion with the city of New York, represented by the crowd below. I had a sense of having stepped in otherworldly matters. At some point in one of the crossings, I lay down on the wire and looked at the sky, and I saw a bird above me. And again, because of my sense were decuplated, I could see that bird pretty high up, and I saw the eyes were red. And I thought of the myth of Prometheus there. But the bird was circling and looking at me as if I was invading his territory, as if I was trespassing, which I was. So at some point I thought the gods, the god of the wind, the gods of the towers, the god of the wire, all those invisible forces that we persist in thinking they don't exist, but actually that rule our lives, might become impatient, might become annoyed by my persistent vagabondage there. So my intuition told me it was time for me to close the curtain of this very intimate performance. It was a walk between me and the towers, and I landed on the same tower from which I started, the South Tower, and then I had the octopus of the authority, grabbed me by their hundreds of arms.
When he came in off the wire, Petit was immediately taken into custody and rudely manhandled down into an underground police station deep beneath the South Tower, where he was formally charged with no fewer than 14 misdemeanors, including criminal trespass, disregarding police orders, reckless endangerment, and performing without a permit. Then he was besieged by an army of admiring reporters.
Why did you do this?
That's the thousand why this morning. There is no why. Just because when I see a beautiful place to put my why, I cannot resist.
Weren't you afraid up there at all?
I was not afraid, but I was just looking what I have in front of me. I have really something which was huge and incredible, So afraid not, but living more than 1,000%. So perhaps that's close to afraid, I don't know. But at the same time, I was happy.
You need dreams to live. It's as essential as a road to walk on and as bread to eat. I would have felt myself dying if this dream would have been taken away from me by reason. The dream was as big as the towers. There was no way it could be taken away from me by authority, by reason, by destiny. It was really anchored to me in such a way that life was not conceivable without doing this.
The astonishing feat of high wire poetry was the highest point in Philippe Petit's life, and in many ways, in the life of the Twin Towers themselves. As Guy Tozzoli had predicted, the exploit was front-page news around the country and around the world. And Petit himself became an instant folk hero, and nowhere more so than in New York. In the end, thanks in large part to Tozzoli himself, who personally interceded with the judge, all charges were dropped, and the 24-year-old Frenchman was sentenced instead to perform for a group of children in Central Park.
Philippe Petit was the first person to humanize these things. He put a human mark on them. He said, I don't care about your architect and your plans for world trade. I'm going to walk this thing. And there he did, doing this amazing feat in which the whole city applauded. Because, first of all, it took guts and skill. But also it took these two buildings and he conquered them in some astonishing way that had the whole town cheering. But it was an astonishing moment. And after that, it never happened again. It's as if you did that once. It was not to be repeated.
Fabulous, you know, it's just that this guy had done this, and it made the towers belong, if you would, more to New York.
Petit himself would never lose his deep love for the towers. In honor of his achievement, the Port Authority presented him with a free lifetime pass to the observation deck on the South Tower, where, on a bright windswept afternoon not long after his historic walk, he signed his name in indelible ink on a steel beam overlooking the vast canyon where he had danced among the clouds. In the years to come, he would return to the high perch whenever he could, trying, without success, to relive the amazing walk in his mind, and hoping to catch a glimpse one more time of the valiant seagull he had once seen sailing high above him, a quarter of a mile in the sky. It never came.